All right, Tets, what you got for us tonight?
Well, I've been pretty much all my downtime. Whenever I am at home, I've been reading a lot. I have a couple books I've been reading, but I've also been reading through some of my PDFs of RPG systems because I have a huge folder filled with them that I've never touched and never looked at. I'm an
You have
RPG
a
collector.
problem.
Well, I mean, Humble Bundle is such a great thing
Yeah, I
sometimes,
know.
and such a horrible thing sometimes.
Why can't I hold all these RPGs?
Exactly. But this one, actually, I did look for this one specifically because I saw it. I was looking for an RPG to play with my wife and with some of our friends for Halloween for a nice, like, scary themed RPG. And there's a few of them that are like kind of built around the horror genre as
Yep.
opposed to just trying to shoehorn horror in.
Look, Tets, we already talked about this. Dallas, the role-playing game. That's the ultimate horror story that you can run.
I don't know. There's some others.
It's Matt Mercer approved, so you know it's good.
But the ones that I really like take the idea of because the biggest problem that you have with playing horror RPGs is how to keep that tension. How do you keep the tension of horror at the game table between battles and between your character having the spotlight and everything.
Mhm.
How do you keep that tension on? I've seen systems do it, I think, fairly well is by integrating some kind of tenseful thing, regular mechanics. Like case in point, this is not the RPG I'm going to talk about, but there's one called Dread where you don't roll dice. You have a Jenga tower, and you have to pull a block out and put the block on top. So you're stressed about. I mean, you're playing Jenga, and if you just pull wrong, your character might.
It's
die.
like a weird meta thing. It's like you get tense about the game, so you're tense and roll up, and then you pull the piece out first.
But I don't know how well that works with Dread necessarily because it's not the same kind of fear. It's not. It just is anxiety across the board, but it's not the same stress and anxiety on your person. Whereas 10 Candles, the RPG system that I am going to talk about,
16 candles.
10 Candles.
Give me all those 80s.
Where's my Molly Ringwald at?
Yeah.
I like that movie. But go on.
Fall under cult classics or
No.
no, not at all. But anyway, 10 Candles, the main mechanic or driving mechanic, I guess, that everything else spiderwebs back to, is the fact that you play the whole game by the light of 10 lit tea light candles. You turn out all the other lights and you just light these 10 candles.
How do I read my character sheet?
Well, so here's the thing. The game itself is actually a zero prep game.
Oh, okay. Nice.
It's meant to be done as a one-shot. It's not really designed for extended campaign play.
Is it almost like Werewolf in that vein, kind of? Like the Werewolf card game, you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, yes and no.
Well, that's hidden information, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, but it's like a role-playing game.
Oh, is it? I've
mean,
not.
like-
I've only heard
like-
of people play it.
I mean, you don't have like a character or anything. I mean, you do technically, but the game features you like acting and role playing in it. That's not like the point of the game. It's still a game that you win or lose, but keep going, Tess.
So the main premise of every single setting of 10 Candles is that 10 days ago the stars and the sun disappeared from the sky, and 5 days ago they appeared, and then your game begins.
Who is they?
And so that's part of the fun of the game. So the game itself falls under, it's not a survival horror game, rather they call it a tragic horror, because the first thing you do when you sit down at the table and light the candles is you record your character's dying message to the world, because no player is going to survive the game. That's why it's a one-shot. You know for a fact nobody gets out alive.
Okay.
The mechanics for this, I think, is really well done because encapsulates that idea so well in such a way where you're not feeling like unresolved, I guess, because you start off with your ending statement. You record it on a on a phone, or if you have an actual tape recorder or whatever, and whenever your character dies, you play your death message. But the mechanic, as I said, was the 10 candles, which the game itself is set into 10 different scenes, one for each candle. At the beginning of the game, the players have 10 dice, 10 d6s, and in order to achieve a success and have narrative control over what's happening during the scene, they just have to roll more sixes than the GM. And in that first scene, the GM has 0 dice. He can't roll against them. In the first scene, the players are going to be winning. But for every one that they roll, GM. At the end of the scene, when the candle goes out, and yes, it's when the candle goes out, whether it burns out, if somebody tips over a drink, if you sneeze wrong, somebody knocks the table and 4 candles go out, you jump forward 4 scenes.
Interesting.
And for each scene that ends, that pool of 10 dice shrinks permanently. So the GM gives back those ones, but then the pool shrinks and the GM gains that many dice. So on the second scene, the GM has 1 and the players have 9. Third scene, GM has 2 and the players have 8, so on and so forth. So by the 10th scene, the GM has 9 dice and the players collectively have 1. And they better be hoping they're not going to roll a 1 or else the GM gets that die. So that's how it's tragic horror, is that as the candles go out, your dice pool shrinks. And also as the candles go out, the light by which you're playing the game is slowly shrinking. In a game that's about creatures hiding in the dark, and that's the other main point, is that they are afraid of the light. They cannot survive in bright light. So they are systematically taking out the lights of the world. And whatever they are is kind of controlled by the GM based off of what story they're wanting to tell, and fun of the game is discovering what are these entities now hunting us. I've watched a lot of playthroughs and I've seen everything from shadow monsters to aliens to actual cannibal Shia LaBeouf.
So that's awesome.
Oh, have you seen that? That's another RPG, by the way. I don't know if you've ever seen that RPG before, but that's actually an RPG, actual cannibal Shia LaBeouf.
No, I've just watched the video.
Oh yeah, my god.
In and of itself, the RPG sounds funny. But anyway, the whole point of the game being zero prep, after you light the candles and after you record your death statement, you go through character creation. Every player is going to get 4 index cards, one for each of their 4, I guess, the 4 things about their characters. They have a vice, a virtue, hope, and a thing that they do in the very pits of their depravity when their spirit breaks. Is when you write down your vice, you hand the card to your left. When you write down your virtue, you hand the card to your right. And then I think you keep your hope, and then it's randomized what breaking point you get. Might be vice versa, something like that. But essentially, form your character around the cards that you get.
Interesting.
Yeah. And so, and again, that's part of the whole zero prep idea, is that you just kind of build real fast and play.
Yeah, it's like a play and go kind of thing.
Because you're not like spending a whole bunch of time like building your character, you're not as attached to them. And I think mechanically speaking, that's part of why it makes it more okay to have your character die at the end of the game. Yeah. Because you're not as invested in it because you haven't spent 10 hours trying to build this perfectly min-maxed murder hobo. Not to say anything against building min-maxed murder hobos. I just mean that obviously you're invested in those type of characters and wouldn't work as well in 10 candles because of that reason.
Really, don't build min-max murder hobos. Don't be that guy.
But I mean, if your whole table likes it, then fine. You know, if it works for your group,
I'm just messing around, people.
Yeah, I know. But
Don't rustle your jimmies.
so those cards, the way that they come into play, if you roll no sixes, you, by working into the narrative about what's going on, you can then re-roll. Can't remember how many dice you re-roll. I think it's based off of the scene and based off of how many failures you have or whatever. But you're able to re-roll those dice. But once you do, you take that index card and you dip it in one of those candles and you light it on fire, and it's gone forever. So you literally have to burn away your character sheet in order to try to survive longer. Dude.
This sounds very Stephen King-ish to me.
It does. Like, this game sounds like such a great Halloween game to play.
Yeah. Now you just got me wanting to watch playthroughs of it.
I can shoot you some. There's some good ones
Yeah,
on.
I
I think my favorite one takes place on like a decrepit cruise ship. Like the sun and the stars went out in the middle of the cruise, so they just kind of kept going out to sea, and then like everything started going to
so you need to link this to me.
It sounds like a fun game.
Yeah, it sounds really neat. It's like you were saying earlier, kind of touched on this, and a lot of people agree with this statement. Even in the books you'll read about in role-playing game books, that horror is kind of like the hardest thing to do as a GM.
Yeah.
Honestly, it's probably one of the hardest things to do in any form of media.
Yeah, even in movies and games.
That.
Yeah, I'd probably agree with you. Like, to do it successfully. I mean, anyone can
do
anyone
can just try it.
But
But
Anybody
like,
can do
there are
jump
very
scares,
few successful horror games. Like, movies probably are one of the best because it's more like condensed.
movies and books. Books more so because it's your imagination.
I was gonna say I think books do an amazing job because I think the pacing too in books, because there's a pacing difference between books and movies, I guess.
Oh yeah. But yeah, movies are just it's too reliant on jump scares nowadays.
Yeah.
I like I guess some of what it's trying to do with like the interweaving the physical stuff, but this does not sound like my kind of game at all.
This sounds totally like my kind of game that I'd want to play at least once.
Like, just because I can't connect with horror, and like, just knowing my character's gonna die just puts me even more off on it. It's like, what's the point of any of this? Like, I've got better things to do, I guess.
A narrative game, it really is.
Yeah, it's like something you've got to, you got to go ahead of time to your group and go, hey, do you guys want to try out this thing? It's very kind of like atmospheric and all this other stuff. You want to give it a try and see if it works, kind of thing.
And it's very indie. I mean, that's kind of
it's very artsy fartsy.
I feel like, it's but it's only, I want to say $10 on their website, and I think it's also on DriveThruRPG.
Yeah,
I bought it on their website.
So you got artsy fartsy games. We need to play Everway one day for monthly modules. Because I think
is that the one you've talked about?
Yeah, I talked about it on one episode, so you probably know all about it. But we gotta do that eventually. You need to let us know how this goes for you.
All right, I'm gonna play with a couple other married couples, so it's gonna be interesting to see how that comes to life with their characters.
This also seems like something cool to do for people who don't typically roleplay either. Actually, hearing you talk about it, because people who aren't involved in the hobby already can probably grasp a lot more. Like, we're going to act and pretend, and you kind of have characteristics on an index card that you burn. It seems like a lot more something that people like that would like. Whereas a lot of people who play rolling games, kind of like we said before, like to have their stats and their character sheet, and they want to roll their dice and do all that stuff. So.
But again, I do think that style of gameplay lends itself better to campaign and to long-term gaming.
I agree.
Yeah,
I mean, even if you didn't die at the end of the game of 10 candles, or you extended it somehow, or whatever the case was, I still don't think that its setup would do very well beyond 2 or 3 games. I really don't.
Yeah, it does seem to lend itself to a quick game, which, I mean, is why they made it that way.
Right. I mean, you only have how long it takes 10 tea lights to go extinguished.
It's the paranoia of horror games. Instead of getting 10 clones, you get 10 tea. You get tea candles.
Like one of the other things that I thought was really cool, and again amped up that whole, because again the fear aspect in this case I feel like is much closer towards the fear that the game's building as opposed to a Jenga tower.
Right. Yeah.
But because the tea lights, for the most part, tea lights kind of, I mean, on average, should be extinguishing about at the same time if you let them naturally go out. So you can have 1 or 2 that'll wink out early on, but then as the game goes on towards the end, you're having them just dying in droves. Like, there was one episode where I saw in the course of about 3 minutes, they lost 7 candles just due to timeline. It extinguishing themselves. It was like, holy crap, you couldn't get anything done, and it's nothing right after the other, and oh my goodness, what's going on? Game over.
Yeah.
But again, it very much is a sit down and do that once, but I think it'd be fun to try,
Here's some 7-hour tea lights on Amazon.
That's how you metagame this game. You go behind your GM's back, you buy 7-hour tea light candles, you switch them out before the game starts.
They just look like thicker tea lights. So.
Oh, Mao.
I was just curious what the average runtime of a tea light was.
Yeah. Oh my god.
I don't know. I see some people saying about 4 hours, maybe.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I think it's like 3 to 4 hours usually.
Can you run off the top of your head for over 7 hours? You guys win after like hour 5.
Right.
That's when the GM starts accidentally breathing hard and blowing out candles on accident.
I mean, is there a rule if the GM just blows them all out?
Oh no!
Yeah,
I accidentally
the
spilled my Mountain Dew on this.
No, not just blatant. I mean,
the rule is if the candles go out for any reason at all.
Right. It's like you got to physically restrain your DM.
Tie them up with a straitjacket to add to the mood of the game.
Yeah.
You got to roll his dice for him. Yeah, man.
Just put it in his mouth and let him spit him out on the table.
Right.
I want to hear a report of how your game went because it sounds really cool. I like the kind of idea.
Yeah.
And I like how Stephen King-y it feels because a lot of his stuff is like it's the unknown.
Yeah, and that's a lot of the fear of the game. And so, again, part of that character creation where you're doing the cards out, the GM is actually involved in that. And so one of the players does get to determine one of the things about them, as well as I think it's up to 2 players end up actually designing part of them.
Mm-hmm.
But they can't do, it's only an old lady and we just don't understand. They're not allowed to do that. It has to be very abstract. And then the GM can put it together to what the horror is. And you may not find out what it is. That's part of the game, is something in the darkness that is hunting you. You're trying to survive.
It's epilepsy.
I think it sounds fun.
It's epilepsy. That's what's trying to get you. All right, this has been episode 28 of the Podcast of 5 Rings. Your source of enlightenment in the realm of video games, tabletop, anime, film, and tech. Each episode of Podcast of 5 Rings releases Monday mornings on iTunes and SoundCloud. Now talking about topic day by day on YouTube, with the full video releasing on Fridays. Follow us on social media, Podcast 5R on Twitter, P5R Podcast on Facebook. Check out MetaStream. They've been playing Final Fantasy 14 because it's got a new update out where you go to Evil East and stuff. So I think they've been streaming that. Twitch.tv/PSO for no. We will check you guys out next week. Hopefully you get to listen to us doing some samurai and rolling some dice and getting some strife and all that good stuff and outbursting all over each other. We'll see you guys then. Bye.
Bye.
Later.